The 2024 minor league season is coming to an end, so of course it's time to start things off in AAA for the minor league update, taking on the El Paso Chihuahuas. So we're going to be sending out Adrian Morjan, and he'll be opposed by Sergio Lima, making his 9th start at the AAA level. Take a look at the River Cats lineup 1-9, as well as El Paso's lineup 1-9. We'll start things off bottom half of the first inning. 2 outs with Tristan Ornelius hitting a ball at the right field. That one's going to carry over the fence as the Chihuahuas strike first in this one, and it's a 1-0 lead. On to the top of the second, Ricky Ruff at the plate finds a hole on the left side of the infield to lead off the inning with a base knock. After that, it's Edmundo Sosa, and Mundito is going and splitting that left center field gap. That's going to get up against the wall, and it's going to get there so slowly that Ricky Ruff is able to score all the way from first base on an RBI double, and this game is tied at 1. On to the top of the third now, and the River Cats take the lead as Jorge Figueroa, the Puerto Rican outfielder, hits a bomb to center field. That baby is way out of here, as the River Cats now have a 2-1 lead, as they would take that into the bottom of the 5th, where Lima is still on the hill. He's going to give up a hit to the opposing pitcher, Morjan, there, as he grounds one up the middle. Next batter, or 2 batters later, it is Xavier Edwards, who's going to find a hole on the left side of the infield, smacks one through for a single, so first and second for the Chihuahuas, brings up Ornelius, chops one to first base. The poor fielding first baseman of Clay tries to turn 2, ends up getting nobody, everybody's safe, bases juiced for Rosario, hits a ground ball, should have been an inning-ending double play, but instead they only get 1 as the transfer to Sosa was dropped. So it's a 3-2 game now, runners on the corners, 2 outs, as then Feliciano hits one into right field, another run comes in. It's now a 4-2 lead for the Chihuahuas, and then with 2 outs, it would be Blaze Alexander who blazes one into those right field seats. A 3-run shot busts this game wide open. It's a 7-2 ball game, and they would take that lead to the end, as the River Cats did tack on one more, but the final score in this one was a 7-3 Chihuahua win for the El Paso AAA team of the San Diego Padres. And now let's take a closer look at some of our players down in AAA Sacramento. Of course, starting things off with the bats, we've got Jorge Figueroa, who was the best bat on our AAA team this year. I knew he had the potential to be good. It was just a matter of if he would ever actually produce offensively, and the numbers matched his potential. This year, definitely putting up 19 home runs with an 860 OPS helps me believe that he could be a solid piece for us in the big leagues. Maybe next year, maybe 2 years from then, but I am looking to have him possibly be one of our backup outfielders next year, because I'm kind of looking, I maybe want to trade Derek Kloboff for a pitcher, since we already have basically a better version of Derek Kloboff, and I don't need 95 versions of these high contact, decent plate skills, okay fielding, high-speed guys throughout our organization. But we'll get more into that, obviously, once the offseason rolls around, which we, of course, have the rest of the season, and then, of course, the playoffs to get through. Edmundo Sosa also put up good numbers in AAA this year. He is not a prospect at this point because he is 28 years old, but there's no denying that he's an incredible defensive infielder. The question is, can he hit in the big leagues? He could not hit in the 55 ABs he got this year, but those are 55 ABs, so it's a very small sample size. He is definitely worth keeping around as infield depth, though. Amos Clay is the guy who we signed halfway through the season. He was just sitting in free agency. He only got 42 ABs in AAA this year, but did put up an 823 OPS in those 42 ABs. And he's actually gotten a decent amount of at-bats in the big leagues with Tampa Bay from 2021 to 2022, and he performed quite well in those games. And then he got a cup of coffee with Oakland last season, and then they just didn't bring him back. He was 26 years old, just sitting in free agency, a first baseman, corner outfielder. Very good bat, very fast, complete liability in the field, and not great plate skills, but he is a decent guy to maybe keep around. We'll have to decide once the offseason comes around, obviously. Ricky Ruff, he is 26 years old now. Obviously, we know he can hit against right-handed pitching, not so much against lefties, despite being a switch hitter, so I might try to just make him hit against lefties, or make him hit as a lefty-righty player instead of just a switch hitter, since he can't really hit against lefties anyways. And he's also very good defensively all around the infield, so he is worth keeping around as infield depth in our organization. I'm just not sure he's much more than that to us. while Jalen Miller had a decent year in AAA, solid contact, power's actually getting to be improved quite a bit, decent plate skills. He could be a solid depth infield option as well. Then on the outfield side of things, you got Keith Klatt, who had an okay year in AAA, 11 home runs, 21 steals, 752 OPS. He's still only 23, so he's obviously worth keeping around his depth since he's still so young. While Robert Kondo is a guy whose numbers definitely do not match his ratings. He's a very good contact hitter, he's got good plate skills, extremely good defensive outfielder, and he's a switch hitter. I'm hoping he can start to hit some extra base hits, though, because he's severely lacking in that, and that's a big reason why his OPS is so low, because his OBP is actually not too bad. It's definitely not what you would expect from what his plate discipline is, but it's not bad. It's just he also pretty much only hits singles, which we'd like to see improve. While we also have SMB, Seth Mejias Breen, down in AAA, while like Kondo, his numbers don't match his ratings, but unlike Kondo, SMB is 32 years old. And we will be moving on from him next season. There's going to be some new faces around in the minor leagues in the 2025 season, which will be season 7 of this franchise, because there are quite a few guys throughout our minor leagues that are underperforming, or they're getting too old, or I don't think they're going to really be anything other than minor league depth, and I maybe want to get some other different people in the organization. So Seth Mejias Breen will be one of those players who will be getting moved on from in the offseason. Now taking a look on the pitching side of things in AAA, there was Logan Webb, who of course had another great year in the AAA rotation. Sterling Sharp, another great year for him too. Ratings are quite good. He's just not quite a prospect anymore, and I'm not sure if he's ever going to get a shot in the big leagues with us, so he might be a trade piece this upcoming offseason. There's also Seth Corey, who is yet another very good C-potential starter that we have in AAA. He could be an option for us out of the pen next year as well, so he's an option as a starter or a pen. I'm not opposed to using starters in the bullpen if I want to get them innings in the major leagues before they actually have a spot in the rotation of the big leagues. We saw we did that with Braylon Marquez this year, but of course now he's obviously in the rotation since Jay Groom is hurt. But like I said, I'm not opposed to using starters in the bullpen to give them innings. And then you've got the Massachusetts native Tyler Beede, who actually worked as a starter this season in AAA, and he put up really good numbers, low 3 ERA and FIP. He added a slider to his pitch mix, and that seems to have helped him become a pretty good pitcher in AAA. Obviously not a prospect, he is 30 years old, but he is still worth keeping around as a guy who could also get some looks, either starting, making spot starts, or being a long man in our bullpen next season. You saw Sergio Lima pitch in the game, obviously. He split time between AAA and AA this year. He is a 3-pitch pitcher, and because of that, I think he is a prime candidate for adding a new pitch in this offseason. I might work on adding a cutter to his arsenal over the offseason. We've also got Domingo Acevedo, who came over from the Yankees organization. He worked out of the pen this year. He struck out a ton of batters in the PCL this year. He's just also not a prospect, and he has a low walks per 9 rating, which is worrisome. He throws extremely hard and strikes out a lot of people, and those are two things that tickle my fancy. Brandon Finnegan is a guy who, despite his ratings continuing to improve, his performance never really does. He is a true 4A guy at this point, I would have to say, and we possibly might move on from him in the offseason. He's always demanding like $2+ million as well, because I guess he's like an established player in the game, so the game just thinks he should be paid that much. And then, of course, we just have so much depth in our organization when it comes to arms that do we really need to keep a 31-year-old next season Brandon Finnegan around? I don't really think so. So taking a look at Rafael Ponce, who is one of those young arms we have in our system, and we're really starting to get into how deep the organization is when it comes to pitching, and because of that, I think that my plan for next season, or the offseason heading into next season, is to just not sign any relievers. Unless I'm really wowed by someone who's available in free agency or someone who doesn't get offered arbitration by their team, unless I'm really like, this guy needs to be a part of my organization, I don't think I'm going to go out and spend any money when it comes to relievers and just spend it at other positions. We're just going to let Middleton and Gazelman walk and then fill out the rest of the pen with all these guys we've been developing over the past few seasons. Yaxel Rios is, of course, another one of those solid bullpen options. And then we've got TJ Trejo, who I really hope he can turn things around. He's actually still only 23 years old because he's been pitching in the big league since he was 19. I think I got a comment the other day where someone was like, how is Trejo still only 23? MLB, and it's amazing. It's just because he's been pitching so long at such a young age. I mean, I drafted him and he spent like a couple months in the minors and he just worked his way straight up from AA through AAA, and then he was in the big leagues striking a ton of people out. It just the last 2 seasons of the big leagues, he really hasn't been good at all, and by not good at all, I mean he's been quite bad. And I'm hoping he can turn things around because he is one of my favorite guys to pitch with in game. Now we move on to the AA team, Richmond Flying Squirrels, as they take on the Bowie Bay Sox at Oak Street Park. Josh Rogers, the left-hander, making his 12th start of the season for Bowie, and he'll be opposed by the hard-throwing right-hander out of Puerto Rico, Chris Sandoval, making his 7th AA start. Take a look at the Flying Squirrels lineup 1-9, as well as the opposing Bay Sox lineup. We'll start things off top of the 3rd after a bunch of nothing through the first 2 innings, as Sandoval's pumping the heat right past Fraggle Rock, and then Jeffrey Not Vince Staples, who has had a rough last 6 games, comes to the plate, and he proceeds to not have a better game here as he goes down looking on the 91-mile-an-hour splitter as Sandoval's working that strikeout pitch. Top of the 5th, John Carlos Encarnacion hits one into right field. Stamper has some trouble with it in right field, but it's going to then allow, with 2 outs, Jeffrey Not Vince Staples to hit a ball to right field where Ricky Stamper is positioned, almost an office supply to office supply hookup, but instead it's going to be Ullman getting this one in. It's an RBI double for Staples, and the Bowie Bay Sox have a 1-0 lead. Top of the 6th, Cesar Turris Jr. hits one down the left field line, almost hits the ball boy, but he's going to be held to a single here with 2 outs. Then it brings up Manzanillo, flies one out to right center field, and the right fielder makes the diving catch. That's Fraggle Rock out there in right, as he robs Manzanillo, keeps the game at 1-0. Still a 1-0 game here as Reynel Delgado, with 1 out, is going up the middle for a single. Then it brings up Brigman, who is going up the middle as well, with another single. Back-to-back singles for the Flying Squirrels. Next batter up is Albert Tadano, and he's going to smack one through the right side of the infield. Delgado's rounding third, heading home. The throw from Fraggle Rock is not in time as Reynel Delgado scores and ties the game up at 1. Ike Odom, the Australian, came on for the top of the 8th inning, worked a scoreless inning by striking out Brigman to end the inning. Then on the top of the 9th, the 2 first names, Sean John, entered the game. The right-hander also worked a scoreless inning as he would strike out another batter. That was Encarnacion to end the 9th inning. Then we move on to extras, where Jordan Bolger came on for the 11th inning, and he would start off the inning by striking out Wilkerson, Stevie Wilkerson, last year's Orioles representative in the All-Star game, now in AA, striking out to start the 11th. Next batter up is Brugman, who's going to pop up to center field, and then to cap off the 1-2-3 inning, it is Cloud hitting a dribble over to third, where Patrick Parker fields and shucks across the diamond. On to the bottom of the 13th now, where Chris Bubick, the lefty, came on to face the big bat of the Flying Squirrels lineup of Ricky Stamper, and he's going to put a stamp on this one as he launches that one out to right field. That gets up against the wall, and Stamper has himself a double here with 2 outs. Next batter up would be Reynel Delgado, 0-1 count, line drive left field, right at the left fielder, and then around the 17th inning, I got a bit frustrated, decided not to play the rest of the game. Quick managed it instead, and the Flying Squirrels do win on a Reynel Delgado walk-off walk in the bottom of the 18th inning, as they do come out on top over the Bowie Bay Sox in this matchup. And now let's take a closer look at some of the players on our AA roster with the Richmond Flying Squirrels. Of course, starting off with the bats, you've got Ricky Stamper, who was the best bat in AA for us this year. Really had a breakout season, 827 OPS, 14 home runs, 15 steals. He's one of those C potential guys who could be a pretty good 4th outfielder for us someday, and he's still only 20 years old. He can play all 3 outfield positions, although he's not an ideal center fielder, and he can also play first base. Pretty decent bat, all-around good bat, and he's got above-average discipline, so he's a pretty good player to keep an eye on throughout the years in our minor league organization. Then we got Albert Tadano, who had an 817 OPS. He's another one of these high contact, good plate skills, but absolutely no pop in his bat type of players that we have like 9,000 of. They definitely seem to be the most popular player type among generated players in this year's MLB The Show, and despite him putting up good numbers, it's just he's in his mid-20s, and we already have so many outfielders in the organization that are better than him that he's either not going to be brought back in the offseason, or he's just going to be signed to be brought back as minor league depth, which we can always use because we always end up having a ton of minor league injuries throughout the season, and I'm always having to play weird people in weird spots, like I have to play infielders and outfielders because I just never have enough players. There was also Bryson Brigman, who had a pretty good year in AA, but he's also one of these older guys who put up a decent season, and there's just really not room for him in the organization to really ever get a chance in the big leagues. So we got him in a trade to the Marlins in the offseason. I don't even remember who we sent to the Marlins. It wasn't the Avellino deal. I don't remember who we traded for him, but he's someone who's not really worth paying any attention to anyways. And then we've got Cesar Torres Jr., who had a pretty decent season at the plate, and his ratings are actually looking not half bad nowadays, and he was actually boosted to a B potential. That's actually the first player I've seen that happen with in MLB 19. At least I don't remember seeing anybody on my team boosted from a C to a B or a D to a C or anything like that. It used to happen all the time. Like, someone would have like a half-decent season and they're just all of a sudden a B potential, and then this year they just like docked it down to it just never happens. I don't know if that's like the one thing they decided they want to change in franchise mode this year, and just everything else is like, yeah, all these issues you've been complaining about for a decade, yeah, they don't matter. We're just going to make it so you can't have actually any progress in your minor league organization when it comes to potential. But nonetheless, it is good to see that Cesar Torres Jr. is starting to put together a decent minor league career and look like he could be a pretty good player for us someday. Then we've got Ryan Hacker, who got hurt this year, but he is still very much part of the future plans. He still got on base an absolute shit ton in AA, and since Buster Posey will obviously not be the backup catcher next year, Hacker will definitely be getting that job, as Chase Numata and Jin DeJong will either not be back in our organization or will just be in AAA yet again. And then Reynel Delgado, now combined with Cesar Torres Jr., is definitely a big reason why I felt comfortable trading away Sherwood Mooney to the Marlins at the deadline. Obviously not overall as good of a player as Sherwood Mooney, but he is a very well-rounded, solid across-the-board player. He's still only 23 years old, switch hitter, can play all over the infield, be potential. He could end up being Peter Mooney's replacement at second base. Maybe this upcoming season, maybe we sign a stopgap at second base, and then Delgado takes over whenever he's ready, or maybe even Peter Mooney is back for next season, but he hasn't exactly been that great this year, as it looks like he's starting to fall off, and he is going to be, I believe, 35 next year. And then Braxton Davidson is another one of these underperforming players that I mentioned earlier. We got him in the Carlos Gonzalez to the Atlanta Braves trade a few seasons back, and he had one really good year in our system where it looked like he could be a pretty good option for us, but then he's just been utter garbage ever since, and there's really no reason to hold on to him. We can always just fill out more different guys at our first base depth throughout the organization. And then Sandro Fabian is the underperformer of underperformers. He is a B potential prospect for the entirety of this franchise. He has been in our system since day one that I started this franchise, and he has barely progressed offensively. The only thing that's progressed for him has been the fact that he throws an absolute cannon from right field. And honestly, we might get a little nuts. You want to get nuts? Let's get nuts. We might try to convert him to a pitcher over the offseason and into next year. I think could be a little cool experiment to have. Something that you don't usually see, but it does happen quite a bit throughout the minor leagues in real life. So I feel like he would be a prime candidate for that. He's a hard thrower. He will obviously need to develop some off-speed stuff, and he will obviously need to learn how to actually pitch, so I'm not going to go and make him have some absurd ratings. It would just be interesting to see if maybe he could be a decent reliever for us. And then speaking of pitching, let's move on to the pitching side of things of our AA team, where Julian Ozuna struck out a ton of people in the Eastern League this year. He actually led the entire Eastern League in strikeouts. The thing is, though, his ratings, aside from his K per 9, are quite not that great. And they're going down, despite him having a pretty good season in AA. And he's still only 19 years old, so obviously I'm not going to give up on him. but I hope he doesn't end up having the same issues that TJ Trejo has, where despite his K per 9 being so good, that the rest of his per 9 ratings kind of weigh down his worth. Or his effectiveness, I guess would be the right term to use. We've also got Willie Arroyo down in AA, who I was going to do a prospect profile on, but then he got hurt right as I was about to do that, so he will be getting one next season for sure, as he will be starting the year in AAA next year. And then Bud Vincent, he did get a prospect profile this year, and he performed quite well in AA, and he will also start next season in AAA as planned. Chris Sandoval, he did not pitch much this year in AA, but he was very solid in the games that he did pitch in. He throws extremely hard. He has an absolute shit ton of different pitches. He will throw the kitchen sink. He will throw any of those pitches in any count. Does not matter. He will throw all of them effectively, and he will throw all of them extremely hard. So he is definitely an interesting potential prospect to have in our organization. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we have an abundance of minor league arms that can contribute in the big leagues, and that does not end in AAA. That extends down to AA, where we have guys like James Thomason, who has a B potential with pretty solid ratings. He does have a low home runs per 9 rating, though, but that's not anything we should worry too much about. Then we've got Jordan Bolger, who's a guy who has huge strikeout numbers. The rest of his per 9 ratings are actually getting better, and they're not too bad to begin with. He throws hard. He's got good stuff. You've got Ike Odom, who is an Aussie. He's very solid all around ratings-wise, throws very hard. He also has good stuff, and he's only 22 years old. Sean John, also solid all around ratings, not as good stuff, but the rest of his ratings make up for it. Bryant Crandall, the finesse lefty bullpen arm, he continues to be extremely effective for us in the minor leagues. He has not had one bad season for us since we picked him up, and he's still only 22 years old. And then you've got even Jason Towers, who is a huge strikeout guy, kind of similar to Trejo in the fact that the rest of his ratings aren't the greatest, so it is a little bit worrisome there, but we did acquire him from the Marlins before the season for Abital Avelino, and he is currently out for 6+ months with a torn rotator cuff, so I'm hoping that he does not retire due to that, because those 6+ month injuries are the ones you need to worry about. But with that being said, that's going to wrap things up here for this edition of the San Francisco Giants franchise, the minor league update here to end off the Season 6 minor league season, as we are now heading into the month of September, winding down the major league season, and then hopefully propelling us into the playoffs. I've been your host, Jerseyborn, and I am saying, Straight Outta Boston will tell you that he is the original Sway Lee fan, but that is a blatant lie, because in fact, I am the original Sway Lee fan.